I'm going to talk to you today about a new biomarker, which is based on MRI for detecting glycogen in the brain. Okay. This is a lesson from yesterday, so I'm on with my headset and mic. Hopefully you will hear me better. So brain polyglucosan bodies, or brain glycogen in general, so soluble and insoluble, they are considered, as we all I think agree, the pathogenic factor of APBD. And therefore, an unmet need is a non-invasive biomarker for longitudinal assessment of this progressive disorder, and also for assessing the efficacy of different therapeutic interventions. So what do we have now? The currently available methods are two, and I will just show the pitfalls of each one of them. So the first one of them is the direct identification. This is a direct method of quantification of brain glycogen, and it's based on IV injection of C13 labeled glucose. And then calculation of brain glycogen using metabolic modeling, which I won't go into, it's just highlighted here. But the main problem, and this has been going on for decades even, but the main problem is the very slow turnover of brain glycogen. So you can see here, for instance, from the work of Gulin Oz from the University of Minnesota, that it can take even up to 40 hours to build glycogen, and then it degrades also in a matter of a couple of days, okay, of course, depending on the period in which it was infused. So this means actually that the patients have to be constantly infused for even up to 2 days, and then stay in the clinic for several days for each monitoring of the brain glycogen. And another approach is an indirect approach, okay? And again, it's based on metabolic modeling of fluxes. And here we have the N-acetyl aspartate, okay, which actually, if the cells, here we see the astrocytes, this happens mainly in the astrocytes, because in the astrocyte, the glycogen is diverted mainly to the Krebs cycle, the TCA cycle, by anaplerotic entry, anaplerotic carboxylation of the pyruvate, which then reacts into oxaloacetate, which turns into aspartate, which gives rise to N-acetyl aspartate, which has the same turnover as glycogen, more or less. And you can see here the correlation, the very nice correlation, so you can predict what will be the brain glycogen based on the N-acetyl aspartate. Of course, this is also more complicated than indirect method. So, and of course, the problem is that there's so little glycogen in the brain, and it's very hard to detect it. So what we try to do is to use actually the liquid diet, the first designed by Ramon San and Matt Gentry. And the principle is that you feed the animals with a special Teclad liquid diet where all, so they get used to this liquid diet, not eating, actually just drinking, and then after wash out of the C12, okay, they are fed for 1 day with C13 labeled. All the carbons are labeled with C13, so all the carbohydrates are actually C13 labeled, and also, of course, the brain glycogen. And then they go through an MRI scan using quite a powerful magnet. That's where we got the signal, 15 Tesla magnet. So here are our results. So in a young the main point is that we find the glycogen in the old mice and not the young mice. I can give it to you right now. So these are the results from the young mouse, which is still asymptomatic, APBD mouse, of course, GBYSYS, still an asymptomatic. And in the brain, what you can see is only non-localized signal. Okay, we couldn't detect any signal of glycogen coming directly from the brain. Only non-localized signal you can see here. This is the H1 image, and this is only the C13 non-localized spectra from the peribrain area. And as you can see, it's very low. And what you can see is only after we actually enhance the signal using a nuclear Overhauser enhancement. I won't get into physics too much, sorry about that. So you increase the signal to noise by actually transfer nuclear spin polarization from high nuclear spin to adjacent atoms. But I won't get to it, of course, as a metaphysicist. So these are the brain signals from the young animal. And then at the same time, in parallel, after the MRI scan, we collected muscle, leg muscle.
Oh, Dr. Coklone, you just broke up a little bit. I'm going to see if you come back. Looks like an unstable internet connection.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now if you just want to repeat the last couple seconds.
Sure. Okay. So I'm saying that in the brain, there was only, in the MRI, by MRI, there was only non-localized spectra. We couldn't detect any C13 signal of brain glycogen. And even this was after amplification of the signal by nuclear Overhauser announcement. And when we actually took the tissues, collected the tissues from the same animal, we looked at the quad muscle and the brain, and you can see here the localized, the labeled C13 glycogen by NMR. Okay, and as expected, which the total and the labeled glycogen was lower in the brain than in the quad muscle, and only if you remember organic chemistry, only the stable anomer of glucose, of glycogen glucose, the beta anomer, was detectable. We couldn't see any alpha anomer. So it's a very, very low signal, and of course much lower in the brain than in the muscle. And now let's move to the adult animal, which was symptomatic, 9.5 months old adult animal. So first, if we look at the non-localized spectroscopy, the overall spectroscopy of the, what you can see here, okay, is with amplification, without amplification, NOE. And you can see here actually that we have considerable C13 signal from the quad. This is the quad, and we have various metabolites that expectedly are shown, including glycogen, which is here. This is the C1 carbon in glycogen, which is as a different peak than, of course, in glucose. Then we move to the localized signal of the leg muscle. And you can see that this is a very strong signal. It can easily be observed even after less than 3 minutes, okay, of scanning, okay. These red rectangles are actually just saturation slabs, saturation pulses that are applied to suppress unwanted flow from the blood, okay. So you put it outside of the brain, and we can see a very nice signal of glycogen. Both the beta and the alpha anomer are observable. So this is the muscle in the old animal. And then if we look at so this was the localized. If we go to the non-localized spectroscopy, also there were lower levels of C13 seconds in the head, non-localized in the head, as compared to the leg, okay, which is also expected. So now I'm talking about this slide refers to the non-localized signal. Now, the important observation or the important discovery that we made is that we were able to detect localized brain signal in the brain, only in the old animal. This is the most important message from this talk. Only in the old animals. You remember we couldn't detect anything, any localized signal in the young animal, non-symptomatic animal. Even though the signal to noise is much lower than in the leg muscle that you saw before in the localized MRI, you can unambiguously detect glycogen in the brain, and you can see here actually all the peaks that we saw in the muscle. It is a long scan, almost 20 minutes, but the signal is very clear, and this is actually the main discovery of this study. And then if we just look at the tissues which are collected after the scan, after the MRI scan, so you can just compare here what I had before, the 4-month-old mouse, to compare it with the old mouse. So first of all, you can see that both anomers of the glucose in glycogen are observable. Not only the most stable beta anomer, but also the alpha anomer are observable. Okay, in the quad. In the brain, of course, because you have less glycogen, you can see only the beta. But in the old animal, you have more glycogen also in the muscle. Okay. In addition, you can see that there are many more peaks for other glucose carbons. Okay, and again, this is just glycogen. I remind you, all these spectra are only glycogen ethanol precipitated from the tissues. So you can see many more glucose carbons, which could, of course, be explained by less glycogen degradation in the old animal. Okay, so both in the brain and in the muscle, there is less degradation of glycogen, which is typical, of course, of the disease. And of course, we have more glycogen both in the muscle and the brain after the age of the animal increases in the old animal. So to summarize, we have developed an MRI-based non-invasive method for detecting brain glycogen as a biomarker for the severity of the disease. So it's a diagnostic biomarker, and also for the efficacy of any intervention that you want to test in the present or in the future. Okay. So, and a few issues to discuss. First of all, I think that this can lay the groundwork for designing clinical methods to assess, as I said, the capacity of therapeutic candidates to lower tissue glycogen. However, of course, as I can assume, the disadvantage that you can think of is that we used really a high magnetic field. We couldn't detect anything with lower magnetic field. This is 15 Tesla and relatively long scanning time of 20 minutes. However, we have some explanations and maybe ways to sort it. So first of all, the mouse brain, of course, is very small. Okay, so this is why you need much higher magnetic field to get a signal. So and this actually is a call maybe for generating a rat model. As far as I know, there is no rat model for APBD, which may be easier, in which it may be easier to detect glycogen. And they also looked in the literature, and indeed, not in the method that I used, but by using IV administration of cystatin glucose, you can see in the rat, again, this is a rat brain, also slightly lower, but still high magnetic field. After about 2 hours, you can see a signal after IV injection. Our advantage, by the way, is, of course, to use a non-stressful liquid diet. Okay, so if we go back to the points to discuss, the next point is that yes, so we did detect a signal in the brain in the aged animal, in the old animal. However, it was close to the detection level. If we have a higher signal and higher signal to noise, we should also have a larger dynamic range of glycogen level that we can actually detect, and therefore the efficacy of any therapeutic intervention can be more easily detected, because the dynamic range would be higher if the signal would be higher. And lastly, we've shown that high field C13 MRS can detect in vivo C1 glycogen signal from the leg muscle in a reasonable time. Okay, so this may also be good. So last but not least, I just want to acknowledge the contributors. So most of this work, the MRI scans were done by Talia Harris at the Weizmann Institute. The NMR work was done by Viva Friedman Ezra in the Hebrew University, and the rest of the work were done by my student Hila Vaknin and my postdoc Kumudesh Mishra. This work was funded mainly by IONIS and by the APBD Research Foundation, and Kumudesh Mishra holds the Lady Davis Foundation from the Hebrew University. Thank you very much for listening. I can take
Thank you, Dr. Coklone. I know we're holding questions to the end, but our next one is actually from our next presenter, Matt Gentry, who says, nice talk. Have you tried other GSD models using this method, LaFora, Pompeii, etc.?
Great question. No, only funding for the mice, and I would really like to try other models. Orhan is asking how long do you have to feed? So a day, 1 day, and that's the way also Ramon San did it. We followed this protocol. Who is MV? Verma. NAD. Oh, this is a great question. So this is one thing that I didn't point out. Polyglucosans are actually, to detect polyglucosans, you have to do solid NMR, okay? So, because they're precipitates. So we're detecting total, but actually the NMR or the magnetic resonance is to detect solid, such as polyglucosan precipitate, it has to be done in different ways, and it has to be in a cell-destructive method. I actually looked up this question even before I started this project, and apparently it's not possible, as I was told, to detect solid phase, to do solid phase MRI. So what we're detecting actually is total glycogen, but the majority would be soluble. So it's also indirect in as much as actually you are using soluble glycogen to report also the polyglucosan. And the working assumption is that if you have more total glycogen, you also have more polyglucosans. But in this way, I completely accept it, and this was also a difficulty that I tried to solve but couldn't. So we can only look at the soluble fraction. It's, as far as I know, it's not possible to do solid phase MR by MRI scanning.